Ready, aim, release! Anyone see my mammoth? Hello! We are back. It is yet again Monday, and as always, I'm Mickey, and I'm joined by Carlo. Carlo, how you doing today?
Pretty good. Yep. Just kind of getting to grips with everything. The chaos has started to subside, and getting a few things in order. Bought and built a new shelf, so you get to see that for the next year or something in the background, as long as you keep tuning in.
Yeah, nice. I see just an absolute. You say a shelf. What I see is a stack of the boxes that you use to store miniatures in, which looks like about 8 or 9 big now. Oh.
That pile there is 7 different factions, all in their boxes. So
More than 7 boxes, of course, though, because most of them take up more than one. Oh,
yep.
Dear. Anyway, it's been a week, hasn't it? It's been a week since we were last here, as is normally the case for Tourney Ground. It's been a pretty big kind of mental week across not so much the Song of Ice and Fire, but across the world. But we're here to talk about A Song of Ice and Fire, of course. How have you been?
We're not getting political.
No. I was going to say I'm not going to. Don't worry. How have you been enjoying?
What we're here for.
How have you been enjoying 2022? It's we obviously had games on Friday night. Have you been enjoying the new 2021 season 1, 2022? I don't know what to call it. 2022? We'll just call it 2022. How are you enjoying it so far?
Yeah. I think that the balance is very good. I think that it's an odd one. There's only been 2 weeks. I actually haven't necessarily enjoyed playing that much in the last 2 weeks, which is weird, but it's nothing to do with the balance. Like, it's just I've been as I say, everything's been super chaotic for the past couple of weeks. I felt like I couldn't spend the time that I normally would want to kind of in preparation for playing. Because I always give a lot of thought before any game even begins. Like, I think that is something that a lot of other people don't do. But I normally feel incredibly prepared for the game, and I haven't really had the time to dedicate to even thinking about the changes in that close detail. I've actually spent a lot of my time. I think we'll come on to have a very quick look at it. But I've actually spent a lot of my time looking at and thinking about stuff from 2021. In terms of and actually my mind has much been on that. But when it comes to the game itself, I do think that all the changes are positive, and it's got me wanting to make new lists. But I just think that it's, as we've said loads of times, it's tiny little incremental steps in the right direction, and so it's not wildly different. It's not a huge step change, but I do think that it's an improvement in almost every case.
We'll obviously look into like how we feel about 2022 and some of the changes later on. We've only got anecdotal evidence really. We've obviously got the rankings, and we'll have a look at how they've changed in the last 2 weeks. But there's obviously some anecdotal evidence from our own games and our own feelings, because obviously, like, all the changes have been good, but like you said there, Carlo, it doesn't necessarily mean the games are necessarily enjoyable. And we'll touch on that and what that means. And I think it's something we talked about on Friday a little bit about the win conditions of a game, which we'll come on to later on. But yeah, I mean, obviously, it's been a week, right? It's been a week, and we're only 2 weeks into the patch, really. So it's not a kind of like, oh, everything's changed, everything's massive, because it wasn't that big change. It was the small incremental, like we discussed. So we will have a
I would say this though. 2 weeks in.
Yep.
2 weeks in. People are talking a little bit about like a Stark list that they think might be a thing. They're talking. There's a little bit of talk about Night's Watch, but they were only really nerfed outside of Ranger Trackers. Yep. I can never remember which one they are. Ranger trackers.
The horse ones.
Plus awful changes, plus slight small John nerfs. Generically, Night's Watch got worse, but like people are starting to explore and look at the faction again, whereas like really the amount that the faction was explored was just awful, and then like why go further? So there are people looking at stuff. I'm not going to tell you that there aren't going to be dominant forces. Also, people, are still very caught up on the idea of Drogo being quite a dominant force. I don't necessarily super agree. But I would say 2 weeks to the Season 0, shall we call it, 2021 patch, whatever, 9 months ago, 2 weeks in, it was already absolutely flat out established that Othel was winning the game. Like,
yes.
Guys, it didn't take a month. It didn't take 1 week in. Everybody just read the cards, and Othel was established as the best thing in the game, with various variant list builds taking like at best like 1 month to come together into the version that we saw then dominate the game for the next 9 months in any tournament where anybody bothered to bring it.
Yeah.
Right. So we are not in that situation, in my opinion. Like the speed at which we have come to decide what is best now has already passed. We are already past the point at which everybody knew that Othel was going to dominate the game.
Mm-hmm.
And so we are better balanced. There are less extreme outliers, that is for sure. And that's all positive indicators, all good things going forward.
Yeah, no, it is. I'm not under the illusion that given a little bit more time, I think there probably is going to be a bit of a boogeyman hiding around the corner. I think, like we mentioned briefly before, I do think the John list, once that kind of gets figured out a little bit more as to balancing what it needs to fight into, its matchups, that you take that over the other list that you bring, and then how it gets finely tuned for those matchups. I think we will get to a point where there'll be a John and someone combo, which actually, by the way, like, as much as that is like a bad thing, there's a dominant like pair, I have less concern over that because at least it's a dominant pairing. Like, it's a thing that people have put time and effort.
At least it's a pair and not a full and more awful.
Yeah.
Or,
and it, again,
MOD and MOD,
It requires some skill to know which list you pick into which matchup. Right? You can't just say, I've got these two lists and, I run this into this and run that into that, because actually it goes, well, hang on. These are the kind of lists this one deal with. These are the kinds of lists these deal with. They back up each other's weaknesses, and it's more of a thought process. And each game is still that test of skill. Unlike some of the unfortunate autopiloting that it became, I think, towards the end of 2021. Yeah, no, I mean, I do think there's I call it a boogeyman, for whatever you want to call it. I do think there's going to be a boogeyman there, but I don't think he's going to be nearly as egregious. There's
people will always be able to find. This is the thing. Like, people will always be able to find the imbalance. Yeah, like we have to understand. What stats tries to do is it tries to measure it and then tries to account for it. It doesn't say the game, like it's built on the premise that the game can never be 100% balanced, right? But we can get closer to balance, and we have gotten closer. We've gone a step closer to balance, in my opinion. And if we're more like 1.6, where eventually, after an amount of time, a really high activation Stark build came together, but it was only played by like a few people in person, and it did take a lot of experience to even put the list together, never mind pilot it. Then that is so much better than the position we were in just a few weeks ago, where everybody and their dog was building these awful lists in isolation, not copying each other. Like, every single person was coming to it and was like, oh, I can see that is obviously the most powerful thing in the game. and it was dominant from day one, and dominant by a whole set of different people, not like showing that it wasn't particularly like player knowledge and player skill that was being represented. It was just the list itself. So I think that outlier really was a bad situation for the game, overlying the fact that the game's core fundamentals were quite strong at the time. And actually, I think that the game mode improvements from the 1.6 to 2021 was good.
Yep.
Whether or not I'm unsure so far whether or not game mode has improved again. Like, I actually wonder if we were trying to solve the wrong problem when we change game modes, and that's the thing I'm not yet convinced about whether or not it's an improvement.
Well, we'll come on to that later, I think. But yeah.
Yeah. I think that for the casual player base who want to play one game, it forces more interaction, more engagement, and a game that goes closer to the full 6 rounds, which I think is what people's expectation of the game is. I think that in the pure mechanics of playing a tournament, it has lost a little something of the speed of the game. Games almost without doubt go one full round longer now. That is hour and a half games that are just 2 hours now. 2-hour games are 2.5 hours. The amount of games that will have to be called on time have significantly increased. And that's what makes me apprehensive about it. It's not that the game has changed hugely, though I do actually think that there's been quite a large impact in my own experience. Just the few games that I've played, I must have played 5 or 6 games now in the past 2 weeks.
I think three or four against me, maybe just 1 or 2 against Dan. I think, maybe others.
I played 3. I played 3 games on Friday, and then I think I must have played 2 the week before. So I think I've played 5 times. Every single time, it felt like we were close to one player tabling the other. Like, it was a real situation. You know, there were a number of games that were resulted in tablings, but almost every game, it was on the cards.
Yeah.
Now, we can discuss whether or not you think that's right, like whether or not somebody should get wiped out every game, but that is a monumental shift from previously, from 2021. The lists that I'm playing haven't hugely changed. My opponents haven't changed. The lists they're playing haven't hugely changed, and yet we went from effectively never tabling each other to now almost tabling each other in every game. And that is a very interesting and change in dynamic, and I'm not sure I enjoy it. That's the part where I'm like, I don't know whether or not I enjoyed the games in the last two weeks. But, you know, it's just something we're going to have to adapt to and learn to play with.
Yeah, we might as well let's talk about games and stuff. You know, they're in a very weird spot at the moment. It's Strave's saying he's tabled 2 of his 3 opponents. The game hasn't got much more deadly. There's a little less sustain, which obviously means by definition more deadly, because the like of Taiko and things like that have gone away, and if those big burst heals don't come in, that first unit actually just dies that little bit faster in a lot of cases. But we've experienced it, haven't we, Carlo? We've actually straight up experienced it, where it feels like the VPs for winning a game are a secondary win condition rather than the primary win condition.
Mm-hmm.
In that, if you set out with the objective to push your opponent and to crunch them apart and to pull them apart and destroy their army, you will win. And you will win either by tabling them first, or you'll score enough VPs in that process that you'll win the game in that period of time.
Yeah.
And it's very strange. Now, of the 3 games that we played on Friday, or the 3 games Carlo played on Friday, myself and Carlo played 2, Freefoot versus Targaryen, and then Carlo played his Targaryens against Starks, and 2 of them were tablings, and the last one you had 2 wounds left on the board at one moment, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah.
And you were basically playing scared chicken. You weren't even making any more attacks. You were just retreating and trying to charge block to prevent yourself from dying. Now, who was winning, who was going up, it's actually all irrelevant, right? The point of the matter is that in all 3 cases, it felt like, well, you even said it actually in the last game against Dan. You actually said there's no point me trying and outscore you now because I won't. I'll just win the game slowly. It is a better result for me if I give up the opportunity of getting a narrow victory and go for a draw, which you would have won because of points on the table anyway. It was a better opportunity for you to just run across the board and try and kill his last unit in the last 2 rounds of the game, which felt weird. You know what I mean?
Jesse says before VPs were everything, and now it's a 50-50. I disagree with the concept that it's a 50-50. The way I currently think about the game is that I just think it's flipped. Like, I actually just think it's entirely flipped. Flip reversed, which is the game is entirely about fighting now and not about VPs at all. Whereas before, it was almost entirely about VPs and not about fighting. What I mean by that is that when it came to list selection, right, the very first thing in the game, I used to look at, okay, like this is the mission. This is how I would go about scoring in this mission. Is there anything I need to be really concerned about in his list with that in mind? Or, you know, can he outscore me? Can he get there first and like deny me? Do I need to pick an aggressive list so that I can go and capture 1 VP point off him? Do I need cavalry to like go and get there? They were my concerns. I would pick my list. I would move into deployment and I would decide these are the victory points that I'm going to hold. This is how I'm going to go and get them. And let's start, see what happens. I'll only fight if I can't get the victory points somehow. But you know, I've probably played for an almost guarantee to get onto the victory points first. Then my opponent has to do something and I'll just react to it. Now that is entirely reversed, which is I'm now picking list based on the fact that I'm literally just going to be like, I'm going to go out there and fight him. This list will win against this list in a fight. Forget the mission. And when I deploy, I'm not deploying, can I control this objective? Can I control that objective? I'm deploying like this unit needs to fight this unit. This needs to do this, blah, 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 down the line. Because I absolutely flat out right now believe that you fight first, pick up victory points secondary. Whereas before, I played entirely for victory points and fighting was only a way to get control of more victory points. Whereas now, the primary route to winning for me from the games that I've played so far feels like the primary route is win the fight, end up with the victory points as a side effect.
Yeah. The big difference here is that you don't. People will say like why does it matter or why has the game changed in that way? And I would argue that lists haven't changed, although there is a lot more experimenting. And when you've got more experimenting, you've got less refined combos and things like this. So you are going to find that games are a little bit more deadly, just simply because people aren't using the tools in the way that they understand them before. Plus, to put it bluntly, people like shiny things that do a lot of damage. So they're more likely to test those out than things that are just tanky. But it's the slowdown of the commander scoring means that, you know, you're both going to control 1 point, which means across a whole game, assuming you both control 1 point, maybe 2, that's 10 points over 5 rounds, or that's 5 points over 5 rounds. You're then going to fight over the middle. And if you win the middle, you'll win the game. It's as simple as that. So don't lose the middle. So don't bother scoring the other point on the victory point. Just go and fight your opponent. Because if you fight your opponent and beat him in the middle and on his objective, then you win. Like, he scores 0 points. And that's a simplistic way of putting at it, right? But if you think of a 3 objective kind of game mode, the 5 objectives to be honest, they're just 3 objective game modes with 2 on the flanks. They don't have enough tempo in the scoring of points. Realistically, you might be scoring 2 to at most with a unit kill and control of a third objective. You might score 4 points a round, kind of maximum. And if you score 4 points a round, that's a big round now. Whereas like 3 points a round is kind of like decent, and 2 points a round is kind of what I'd expect you to be looking for after round 2. And at that rate, 2 points a round to 3 points a round, the game's going to round 5. Guarantee it's going to round 5.
Yeah.
And because it's going to round 5, there's more fighting you can do. You can just simply roll more dice.
Jesse says, does 1 VP a round change that much? I do think that it's also like a knock-on effect. Yeah. As Mickey says, like once it gets to a point where you must commit to scoring some points by killing units, because you're scoring 1 less a round, you now effectively must, or at least feel compelled to, also give up an additional point to then win the fight. Right? Like, I can't afford to just camp objectives anymore. So I'm going to give up a second victory point to then throw it into the fight because the fight is more important. But is 1 VP that important? I say yes, because what 1 VP is that the game goes on 1 whole round longer, right?
Guaranteed.
And that is then like not just that could easily then be 2 rounds, because you could be at the point with that extra round that you've created of nobody has any units left to score with or kill with or do anything with. So it used to be that, say, in a 5 objective mode, like I would literally just play for 4 points, 3 points, 3 points, and the game would end on round 10 no matter what, right? Like, and I don't have to kill a single unit, I don't have to do anything, I just have to get 4 points on round 2 and then retreat and score 3 points and 3 points. If I can like kind of force my opponent not to just like score 3-4-4 in reverse, shall we say. But if I'm scoring 3 points, 3 points, 3 points, this is actually me controlling 3 of the objectives, I've still not won the game.
Yeah.
And the game will definitely go to round 5. But if I just play for that and the game doesn't end, then I've given up so much board, I've given up so much of my fighting potential to achieve those points that I'm almost definitely about to like not score any victory points at all in the next round. So I do think that it's actually a subtle but seismic shift in the way that I see the game. You know, you may not experience it. It may be no change to you. But I would argue that if it's no change to you, then you weren't playing a really heavy victory point game in the past.
Yeah. Natlab, you say you could just be faster onto middle and hold out there without killing enemy and win. You could, or kind of like what I would do nowadays is I wouldn't even fight you in the middle. Like, I actually just wouldn't. I'd be like, sure, you've got a unit in the middle that's hard for me to kill. I knew that at deployment, so where's the units I can kill? Holding back objectives, maybe? Right, I'll go kill them instead. I've got 5 rounds to get there. If I can't get my heavy units to you across to your back objectives by like round 4, or even round 3, they should be there by round 3, to be honest. If they're not there by round 3 kicking the shit out of you and kicking the shit out of weak units that aren't defensive, then I shouldn't be playing the game. If I've invested in these heavy kind of like killy units that can't even get across a board to not even far off the center line over 3 rounds, then I'm definitely not going to beat you in 5, because I've seriously mucked something up somewhere. So you're not scoring 3 points. You're scoring 3 in round 2. You might be scoring 3 in round 3. You ain't scoring 3 in round 4, I'll tell you that. So yeah, that whole thing, and it also comes back down to, classically, it always comes back down to this, doesn't it? Activations. Me and Carlo have played a few games, and it's not the only games. Activations are still just important, but it's about when activations happen and how you can hemorrhage activations off players. Um, a good attack, which hemorrhages an activation off your opponent, or two, even if you gambit a unit and lose the unit in the process, is sometimes just worth it for the control it brings you on the later sections of the board. Um, even things we played Winds of Winter, didn't we, Carlo? So scoring's just fucked up anyway. But
Mm-hmm.
but even things like, oh, you can't go last, so I'm gonna charge you with a 3-rank infantry unit, and you're not 3 ranks anymore, so you'll never score another victory point again. Like,
Yeah.
it's as simple as that. Um, the game will go to round 6, you won't score, and I will try and kill you. So there's all of that aspect as well to consider as well.
I do think
Yeah.
that activations are no longer. My advice would be to people that like they're less. It's less an extreme of an
Yes.
advantage.
Yeah.
That's the. I still think that activations are the best way to play, but I believe that as the game goes longer, cheap units, say poor fellows, are a good example, except that they're not a good example because they also got nerfed. A cheap unit such as poor fellows, whose only intent was to hold an objective but die slowly, now have to survive a whole extra round, which I think is enough such that a 6-point unit will finally start to show their value and kill them. And so I do think that cheap units have a higher tendency towards not surviving the game anymore. Whereas in the past, like, it wasn't a risk. Like, I'd put a poor fellow unit down and I'd just be like, this will survive the game. I won't give up a VP. And in the process, I will capture an objective 2 times over. I'll score 2 VPs, not lose any VPs. That's an absolute winner for 4 points.
Yep.
Now, you might score 2 VPs, but you'll give one up in return by dying, and then your opponent will have the objective with the unit that they killed them with, and they'll score a VP. So, like, it's almost like a 2-for-2 trade. You'll lose the activation eventually. And so that cheap unit isn't just amazing value anymore. It's much more complicated. Having the first chance to do really significant damage is still super important.
Yep.
But I have found, and I do think that there will be a lot more of games swinging backwards and forwards just because there's enough time for somebody to come back, right? In the past, it felt like whoever just came in and did something really significant, which normally was your opponent was forced to do something and then you just significantly countered, and that was it, right? We have more time to set it up now, more time for more significant occurrences to happen. And I do think that activations just ruling the game entirely is less apparent, less important. I still would advise you that high activation count is going to win you games. But I do think that there is some credence to, a 6 activation Lannister night bus and stuff like that. Like, that list was silly in the past because it just didn't have enough time to kill enough stuff, and it would just lose on victory point games and couldn't contest enough objectives and couldn't score enough objectives. But now it has enough time to, like, go to town and do what it wants to do. So I think that those are all improvements in the balance of the game. I do think that lots more lists are viable, lots more units are viable, lots more games will be undecided and will be determined, undecided by list, and will be determined by player skill and by a bit of luck and all those things that we want to play the game for. I'm undecided yet whether or not I think that makes the game more enjoyable for me personally, like, which is a really odd statement. But I actually really enjoy the dry Euro VP scoring game. I don't enjoy the go out there, roll loads of dice and kill your opponent game. But that's a personal thing. I do think that there will be some people who really prefer that it's enabled their preferred style. And and yeah, there's winners and losers in every balance patch.
Oh, 100%. One of the things that kind of came across my mind as well was obviously we talk about unit strengths, and there are obviously still good units and bad units, right? I'm not going to sit here and pretend like every unit is viable. Yes, but it did cross my mind, and I put this to the test on Friday. Is the gulf, because the way the game plays out, is the gulf between unit powers as big as we used to see? Because of the way the game plays out, is actually a 4-point unit, generally speaking, just a decent 4-point unit, okay. Now there are obviously winners and losers, right? There are obviously good and bad units still, but I was kind of surprised when me and Carlo played in the way the lists felt, even though they weren't like what I'd standardly traditionally build, right? And I kind of sat down afterwards and thought about it a little bit, and I was like, people always ask for list advice, right? People always on Discords and things, they're always saying, "Oh, what about this list? What about this list?" And I'm starting to come to the conclusion that the list build doesn't matter that much as it should do. It should do, right? And obviously, like commander choice and knowing what good units you've got with that commander, knowing what synergizes with a commander does matter. But actually, like the minutia of like that attachment there should be 1 point here, or that unit should be this instead, or whatever. Like in 2021, I could say no, you should be taking this. I don't feel like that at the moment in the New Balance patch. And it's really weird because it almost feels like, as Carlo says, he says it's not as fun as he would like it to be. It's not his style. For me, I feel like almost like I feel like list building's not there anymore. I just kind of like, I'll just pick whatever I want, throw it in a list and see what happens. And I shouldn't feel like that, right? It should feel more.
I don't think that's true.
No, I mean,
there are still.
I'm willing to take that one on the chin, but yeah.
You know, if you really believe that that's true, then like I could purposefully write you a bad list, and you'd be like, yeah, that's still a good list, right? Like,
yeah.
So all you're saying is that there are more units that you're willing to take.
Yes, I mean that is pure.
Which means that like there's just more viable options.
Mm-hmm.
It's never going to be list building doesn't matter.
So I think the difference is it's a lot harder to point out where a list could be improved. As in, if it functions because everything's trying to be killy, right? It's hard to turn around to somebody and say your list isn't killy enough. Because if you've got a killy component in there, like someone says, "Oh, I've got Tully Cavaliers in my Stark list," I'm like, "Yeah, that's your killy component." You know, yes, you could make it better. Yes, you could min max that to some extent. But yeah, I don't know. It's just a weird one. It's just a weird one. And actually,
I think it's just you.
Maybe it might
just
be
you.
me.
Like nobody else is with you on this one.
No, maybe not. The other thing is that actually, as mental as it sounds, and this is something that Carlo probably does agree with me a little bit on, list themes are kind of gone in a weird way, in that I feel like every list I look at now is kind of generic, in that it always has the same components in it every time I see it. One of the lists Carlo ran is a list I'd literally played like 2 days earlier online, is a list I'd seen someone else come up with. Outside of a few components here or there, maybe, but it just they always look and feel the same. I don't know, that's just me. Again, maybe.
I think this is just you.
Maybe it's just, yeah. Yeah. I don't know. I think it's weird.
I mean, like, even if it's true, I don't think anybody has a problem with it but you.
No, I mean, it's not really a problem so much as
people would rather
have more choice.
And people would rather that the game was determined on the table and not in list building.
Yes. But I also feel like it undermines.
It sounds like you're complaining that list building isn't important enough anymore, that you can't win games by list build alone.
I think that list building isn't as important anymore, in that I just don't think. I don't think I need to spend, like, personally don't think I need to spend nearly as long on list building and coming up with something that's going to work. I feel like any faction you could give me, and I'll be like, oh, that works with this, boom, 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 boom. Like the number of people, I mean, it's obvious, right? The number of people who come up with Axel Baratheon lists with Melisandre and Jack and Hagar in has been like outstanding, and it's always like Axel and Queen's Men, and here's a unit of Faithful, here's a unit of Lightbringers. I can tell you probably what's in your Axel list, and I've never even seen you develop it or build it because it's always the same. Because it's the same components. I haven't seen anyone come to the table and be like, here's an actually interesting idea. I don't know. Maybe that's just me.
So your problem is that Stannis Baratheons now look like Stannis Baratheons.
No, not just Stannis, right? I could talk about it. Lannisters, right? You've got basically 2 builds of Lannisters that I've seen. There's Night's Watch, which all the lists like have different components, but realistically, it's just Hunters, Cold Hands, Conscripts, and Ranger Trackers. Maybe the odd Vanguard makes it in. Maybe Sworn Brothers makes it in. Maybe the odd unit of Veterans makes it in. Like they're all basically the same. I don't know. Maybe it's just me. It purely is just me. In which case, so that whole rant was for nothing. But yeah, I don't know. I don't. You know what it is? I haven't seen anything actually innovative. That's what it is. I don't feel anything I've seen is innovative, and I don't know what I'm looking for.
Yeah, what are you looking for? People took all the changes and they made new lists.
Yeah, and I guess I was expecting something different.
Units are all but like effectively supposed to work with certain commanders and be comboed, and they're built around the idea that they'll combo with certain commanders.
Yeah,
that's what they're valued at. And if you're not using that combo, then you're just generically not using the list or the commander or whatever to its best potential.
Mm-hmm.
And then you complain when you see everybody uses Axel with Queen's Men, despite the fact that he is so Florent. First of the Queen's Men.
Yeah.
He is literally made to go in that attachment.
I know, yeah. I'm not disputing that he should be in that list.
We have Andrew
Estimant. Yeah, first
Andrew
of the King's
Estimant.
Men.
First of the King's Men. And you control and you sat here like, why does everybody put Andrew in King's Men?
Yeah.
Like, because the combo is all but made for each other. They are all but designed to be the unique unit for that commander. Right?
Yeah.
They don't have to have the commander. The commander doesn't have to go in them. You can have multiples of them.
Yeah.
But outside of those list building restrictions, they're effectively built to be the perfect combination with each other. And then we're surprised when everybody sees that combination and wants to run it. And like that combo is a good thing. But that combo should be a good thing. Like there should exist combos, and they shouldn't have to take thousands of hours of experience of A Song of Ice and Fire to be able to find them.
No, I agree. I agree in that sense. But it means that the list builds we see, and to put it bluntly, it just brings me vibes of MOD. They're not built for you, but it feels almost point and click how you build lists for a lot of factions at the moment. That's what it feels like. The spirits of the list of like. I'm not saying that it was some kind of building a Khal Drogo list was interesting, but you compare building Mother of Dragons to building Khal Drogo in 2021. Khal Drogo actually needed you to think. Mother of Dragons, you click on one button and there you go, 20 points, and you put Tycho in there, 25 points, done. It just seems to me that you pick a commander now, and it's like, well, the commander, that's your commander, and well, that's the unit the commander goes in, and then like, well, these are units that benefit this commander, and it's like, the solution or the list build just feels the same. Whereas we didn't see that as much in 2021 before the change. And yeah, it might just be me. I don't know. It might just be me. But I really do feel
absolutely just you, because nothing has changed in that respect.
No. We'll see. We'll see how many lists there actually are, right? That spawn out of all of this. Yeah. Little has changed.
Shall we move on? Because literally nobody has agreed with you in the past 20 minutes. Nobody thinks that your current rant is
it's worth it, yeah.
Oh, Marwin gave you the benefit of the doubt, which is he thinks that he can get away with oh yeah, he's retracted. Yeah, there you go. You lost Marwin, you're one supporter.
I know, right? But he's also right there, by the way. It is because the game is decided on the table, you can like it all comes down to how well you play. I do think it always was a battle of who was better on the tabletop on the day, but me and Carlo had discussed at some length about some matchups almost not being a skill check at all anymore, and some of the top tier stuff. Not awful. Yes, at the very top tables, yes, there was still skill. You had to know what you were doing, but the vast majority of games, it wasn't a battle of skill. Free folk, if you're playing the Raider spam style stuff, it wasn't a battle of skill. It was a battle of did you draw a sword in round one. Whereas I do think that the battle or the skill on the tabletop is now more important in the season one update. So yeah, I agree there. But yeah. Yeah, I don't know. Just me. I just, yeah, I'm just not invigorated when I see anything, and maybe I shouldn't be. I don't know.
That's because you play a boring faction.
I mean, I play multiple factions, so all of them must be boring. So we'll move on, and we will look at what else are we going to look at. Oh, this is a 2021 thing, right? We'll briefly look at this one. There we go. It was the right one. Fancy graphs. Anyone who doesn't like maths, bye bye. No, hang around here. So,
I mean, anybody who does like maths, you should probably look away now because this graph is horrific.
It is. It's awful to look at. But it is interesting nonetheless, right? That's what we're here for. Is interesting things to look at. Carlo, you should explain it. I've talked enough. You explain it.
I'll give it a go. This so I've been analyzing all the results from before the update, before 2021. And this is an interesting graph which Leet Teddy was asking about. He wanted to know basically about neutral usage inside of each faction. This is a lot of information on one graph, so I'll try and step through it step by step. Firstly, I mean, what we're plotting across the x-axis is the points of neutrals used. I only analyzed 40-point games because 40-point games make up like 95+% of all the submissions to the site. Like, that is an interesting fact in itself, and something that I'll have a look at and see whether or not longer games has moved people to playing at 30 points or anything like that in a year's time. But 40 points just is the game, effectively, from what we can see. Nobody really plays outside of 40 points unless they play for novelty purposes. So obviously we can go up to our 50% neutral cap of 20 points. And we see for all the different factions, except neutrals, who use 100% neutrals, not a faction. We see is actually grouped up, though they're plotted as 5, 10, 15, and 20 points of neutrals and 0. They're actually 0 or 1 to 5 or 6 to 10 or 11 to 15 or 16 to 20, but they're all just plotted at their upper bound just for ease of how many points. More extreme than I thought it was going to be is that outside of Free Folk, which is that one little green dot by itself, because they obviously only ever buy 0 neutrals and they don't actually get to plot a graph, they just have a win rate. They have a 52% win rate overall in 2021. Every other faction, even Night's Watch, as the best performing faction by a decent margin, every other faction wins less than 50% of the time if they take 0 neutrals. This is, I think, very interesting point, which is that some neutral usage improves every single faction, no doubt. And I think that everybody's very, very aware of how powerful and how widely used Tycho and Baelish were in the last edition, right? One or the other. You could take both if you want, but one or the other appeared in almost every single list on top tables. What we see also is right down at like 30% win rate, we have our Baratheons when they use 0 neutrals. And above that, we have our low performing Lannisters, right? It's very interesting that the bad factions are really, really bad when they don't use any neutrals. And they rely very heavily on neutrals to win. What we generically see, and this is actually a very interesting talking point, is that almost every faction improves with higher neutral usage, with a couple of exceptions. The only 2 factions that don't want to just use as many neutrals as possible were Night's Watch and Targaryens. Targaryens is quite a difficult concept to talk about. Their data is really, really skewed and kind of rolled up inside the concept of what Mother of Dragons is, because Mother of Dragons had such a significantly high win rate that their activation graph doesn't look like everybody else's, because Mother of Dragons plays at 7 activations and has a really high win rate. So their highest win rate is at 7 activations, whereas everybody else's, the highest win rate is at higher activation counts. Also, the actual points that you spend inside of Mother of Dragons is usually, Tycho, and that might be it. Maybe somebody brings Blackguard. And so they cap out at like 10 points of neutral spent, maybe 2 NCUs, maybe an NCU and a 6-point unit if they want to use Blackguard and not use Pikemen, for example. So those 2 factions peak some neutral usage, but that first bit of neutral usage massively increases your win rate. Just taking a single neutral NCU or a single neutral unit to support your base unit is so important to improving your win rate. Now, one of the most interesting concepts that will surprise people is that even Greyjoys, who generically don't have what's considered to be high neutral synergies, the more they use, the better they do. And even Greyjoys are a very neutral orientated faction. Most of that we have to assume is the high performing neutrals of Blade Men, Bolton Bastard Girls, and Hedge Knights. And then we also see Tycho Baelish, right? Now, Tycho's probably...
Blackguards a lot, I think, in Greyjoy lists as well.
Blackguards,
the one thing they don't have.
I'm talking more generically, not necessarily the specifics of a Greyjoy list.
Yeah.
You take Tycho maybe out of the question. There was a big discussion last week about whether or not 5 points he's still good at. But I don't think that you'll see really wide usage, and I don't think that he's good enough that he will significantly increase your win rate anymore. I still think that you'll see a lot of Baelish get used, and Flayed Men, Hedge Knights, Bolton Bastard Girls, none of these units changed, right? So you can still believe that going forward, high usage of these units will lead to higher win rates. And I think that it's a very interesting kind of set of results, and it really shows the haves and the have-nots of the last edition. That there were certain factions that effectively really heavily relied upon neutrals to be able to do as well as other factions could do without neutrals, and the factions that had the choice to sprinkle in a little bit of neutrals where they wanted to, which is where I think that everybody should be, those ones who could just choose to put them in here or there were by far the most dominant factions. The Targaryens and the Night's Watch both just use neutrals to the amount that they want to, because a neutral piece gives them a real bonus. Whereas we see Baratheons, Lannisters, and to some extent, our Stark and our Greyjoys being forced to take neutral units because neutral units are just good units, and they're just better than the units that they have inside of their own faction.
Do you
And
know what?
so,
Do you know what actually interests me the most, personally, is that it was I'd use Free Folk here as a stable point in that Free Folk's win rate. Obviously, they don't use neutrals, right? So it's a consistent point on the graph, because they are just a consistent win rate. Now this is win rates only, which is obviously never quite the full story. Um, but what I think is super interesting is it moves the like of Lannisters, Starks, um, you know, Greyjoys to a comparable win rate at
mhm,
those high neutral levels. Baratheons are
yeah,
still way off the pace, right? But actually, they're comparable with the natural win rate of Free Folk, which I think says so much about the way like the last edition mattered in terms of like as you say, the power pieces. Um, if you take Lannisters and look, I mean, you only got to look at the list. Lannisters had a appalling, probably not many, to be fair, probably not many games played, um, but an appalling roughly 35% win rate at zero neutrals. And then you compare them to what is close to a 55% win rate, or just over even, at 20 points of neutrals. Like that's an insane difference, absolutely insane. It's a 20% win rate rise from
yeah.
significantly worse than the best faction at 0 points, which is Free Folk, surprisingly, um, to being better than them. Like it, that's just insane. Um,
Yeah, it's not surprising at all that like there's big disparity
no.
when there's no neutrals,
Mhm.
and that disparity narrows as we add more and more neutrals. Because,
Yeah.
well, we're all using the same units at that point.
Yep.
Now, the only difference is our commanders, our deck.
Mhm.
Really, like we're using the same NCUs to a large percentage. Half of our army
Yep.
is the same as each other's. Half of our units, half of our NCUs, half of our stuff. We could be using a neutral commander or not, doesn't really matter. We're all using the same stuff, so obviously there isn't a huge variance in who's winning and who's not. But when we have totally different armies, when nothing of our armies match, because I'm using entirely my faction's core units and you're using entirely your core faction's units, the variance is like twice as big. The
Yeah.
range, we could disclude Free Folk as like not really part of this discussion, but
Mhm.
our variance is like 47% to 32%. Like, it's 15% variance between the top performers and the bottom performers, and it's half that. It's what, like 47% through to
53,
55%.
50,
It's
yeah,
it's an
55.
8% variance once we all spend half of our army on the same thing, which is, almost too good to be true, which is spend half of your army on identical things and the difference in your win rate halves, right? That just tells you that the units available to Baratheons and Lannisters just weren't as good as the units available to neutrals and to Targaryens. Their decks will always matter.
Yeah.
No matter how much neutrals you use, there will always be variance in deck and playstyle and synergies and commander synergies, and you'll always be using at least one of your own units and at least one of your own NCUs, really, in reality. So, how good your best unit or how good your best NCU matters a lot. But if you only have to have one good unit and one good NCU and you can buy all the rest in neutrals, then the variance in how good you can be is a lot lower.
Yeah. It is a super interesting graph. It, it's a very interesting discussion as well, um, in terms of just talking about the impact that neutrals have. Now, do we think the same is true in the new edition? We will see, I guess. We know that things like flayed men haven't really been changed, but other 8-point cavalry have been buffed. So this is what we hope to see this kind of like move away from. But it is an interesting discussion to say that when the most egregious part of the game, you know, to almost, it sounds kind of crazy when you say it like this, the best thing that you could do for list building was not pick your own faction stuff in
Mm-hmm.
2021. It's like invest as much as heavily in you can as in these kind of like decent neutral units, and you'll be in such a good position off that base. The rest of your list, just do what you can with it.
Yeah. I do think that moving forward, we expect to see the lowest. It definitely Baratheons is going to, its performance without neutrals will largely improve.
Yeah.
As Pavel says, Lightbringers no longer need to be Stormcrow archers. They are now actually better than Stormcrow archers. They are good at 6 points. We see, they have real choices at 7 points. They can use their own units. They always had pretty decent NCUs. Now they have some units to use, right?
Yeah.
That's Baratheons moving up. There's a big question around Lannisters for me. Knights of Casterly Rock are a viable alternative to Flayed Men, but the old unit that they used to rely on, poor fellows, now is so significantly worse that I think that the faction. I'm not sure what the Lannister plot will look like. I really am not sure.
Well, I think on that topic with the poor fellow change, you touched on it earlier. I think the significant change is the way the game plays out as well. Poor fellows with the nerf actually just are less useful. Even if they weren't nerfed, I think poor fellows would be less useful. And now that they're nerfed, they're even more less useful. So I think it's it's a difficult time for them.
I think that the change to Tycho alone means that he's not the best 4 points that you can spend on NCUs. So I think that this massive step up and improvement for the first 4 points you spend on neutrals won't be as apparent anymore. And I would like the line to be a lot closer. I'd like the performance to be a lot better with low neutrals by comparison to high neutrals. I do think that it will be. I still think that there will be an improvement in your performance as you use more neutrals still. I still think that for most factions, as you use more neutrals, you will do better. I still think that the neutral cap at 50% is too lenient, shall we say, or just it stops factions from being easily or strongly identified as themselves, because I still think that most people's best choice will be to field somewhere between 12 to 16 points of neutrals, maybe something like that. You're still really great. You're putting in some Flayed Men or some Bolton Bastard Girls. They're still really, really good choices. Plus, I still think that everybody's third NCU will still probably be Baelish or Varys, or they're still they're going to be your third best NCU. They're just not going to be your first best. So still, everybody's going to spend 4 to 5 points in that category too. And all you got to do is buy Flayed Men and 1 NCU, and you've spent 12 points on neutrals, right?
Yeah.
And you're already up there at the top end of how many neutrals you can spend. And your list is probably better. It's not as big an improvement as it used to be. It's not way, way better than the other options. So we may not see significant increase in our win rate based off of it, but I do think that that it'll still be there. I expect it to still be there.
If, just out of curiosity, Carlo, we're doing this is something we don't often do. If you were to choose, if you will, the shape of this curve, right? At the moment, we see them as anyone who's watching live, you'll be able to see this. They're all kind of be it inverse parabolas, right? Basically, or close to. If you're too strong, they're normal parabolas. If you're shit, and they increase quite dramatically, especially for Starks. It's quite sad. What kind of shape would you prefer? Would you prefer having that kind of smooth? It peaks a little bit, then kind of drops off, or would you rather they had a general increase, or would you prefer it just be a nice flat line? What would you prefer?
Well, I mean, it depends what you mean by what would I prefer. The ideal situation would be that they would be flat.
Yeah. No, well, that's fine.
Ideally, taking more neutrals shouldn't lead you to win more.
Okay.
Mathematically speaking, I mean,
I know. I'm asking what you want.
Are we talking about the mathematical ideal situation is we just have a load of straight lines at 50%. Everything just wins half the time. That is.
If that's no, I was just curious what you wanted. That was all. Because that's That's just it's a question, isn't it, about personal choice. Um,
Stats don't care what you want, Mickey.
I didn't say they did. I said, what did you
The
want? That
maths.
was my question.
Yeah, but like the stats don't care what I want either. This
No, of
is
course
an
they don't.
interesting thing. I was discussing earlier with somebody. They asked, they were asking about the stats and the concept around like how you can help somebody
Hmm.
with them. Like how can you tell somebody that the stats are very very clear that 3 NCUs performs better than 2, and like it's like the stats don't care how you feel about it. They don't care how you feel about 3 NCUs or 2 NCUs. They just observe.
Hmm.
They just measure that it is better.
Yep.
And they don't care how you felt about the game. They don't care whether or not you thought it was enjoyable. They don't care whether or not you thought it was powerful. They don't care why you picked it. They don't care what you
Anything.
did with it. They don't care how you played with it, because like thousands of different people have submitted results with it, right?
Hmm.
They don't care what kind of player you are. They don't care what faction you play. They just know that across thousands and thousands and thousands of results, there is an observable improvement to play 3 NCUs over 2 NCUs, or to play high activation counts, not low activation counts, or whatever kind of thing, whatever discussion point we're talking about, right? But like people still seem quite stuck on this concept of whether or not you should play 2 or 3 NCUs. It is a very simple first lesson that people try to kind of like impart upon newer players, is that like, this tactics board's really important, and they can't seem to get past this idea that somebody loses an action every turn.
Hmm.
But the stats don't care what you want. They will only show you what performs well.
Hmm.
And just the pure concept of like, what would I want this graph to look like, is like, well, I don't design the game. I just measure it.
I know.
Like
I know.
the question is what does Michael Chanel want this graph to look like?
I just asked you because I was curious. That's
He,
all. I would love to know
he
what you
should
wanted.
want it to be a flat line, in my opinion.
Hmm.
Though maybe he wants it to be slightly better when you use more neutrals. Or maybe, crazy enough, you could argue that pure factions should perform better than ones with neutrals mixed in. Like, you
Maybe.
could argue that what they want is for the graph to go down as you use more neutrals. If you want to use this cool neutral unit, you can, but that it's worse, because pure faction identity should have better synergies within it than the neutral options do. And that's but that's a design
Oh yeah.
perspective. That's a
Of course it is.
design prerogative. The stats don't, like I say, the stats don't give a shit how you feel about
No.
it.
Of course they don't. No. Of course they
The
don't.
stats don't care what you think.
I was. I have to admit, I would love to see it in a similar kind of way that we see Night's Watch and Targaryen currently portrayed on the graph. In that, I think the inclusion of some neutrals in a list, I would love that to see an increased win rate. Um, in that, like, but not necessarily like, oh, everyone just picks Tycho, everyone's win rate goes up. Not, I don't mean that, but I would love it so that a list could get a little bit better if you picked the right neutral component for the lists. But then if you went too heavily into it, then it would drop off. I quite like that idea personally from a design perspective. But I agree with you. Yeah, you'd love to see it 50% all the way across. Of course, I mean that's true balance, isn't it? Balance in all things. That'll never happen though.
Never
That
happened.
would actually be virtually impossible. So suggesting that that could happen is unrealistic. Um, cool. This is a good point because Carlo dropped himself in it a little bit earlier on today. It's a good point to tell you that if you're interested in all this side of it, there's actually a load more information we're not going to go through whatsoever that Carlo has been analysing. I've selected Free Folk there, but you can go selecting Lannisters. If you've been a patron on stats, he's actually been going through some of the faction stuff that he's interested in himself, mainly Lannisters, and breaking it down and showing people all these graphs and stuff. He is going to be, or he is thinking about doing a breakdown video going through this way more detailed than what we've suggested here.
If you're lucky.
Yeah, we'll see if that happens, and no promises. I can't make any promises for him. But that's something interesting. But it is actually something that our patrons, we don't do inverted commas patron exclusive content but it is something that the patrons actually have access to and can look at if they want to, as a bit of a recap of 2021. I guess this
when
is
I work on new stuff, I ask the Patreons what they think of it.
Yeah.
And they
Yeah.
get to have a look at it and tell me. I mean, half of these graphs exist because people asked for them.
Yeah.
I said, what kind of things are people interested in? And, that's the things that they came up with. So that's what I made graphs about and started to look at.
Yep. Just say the unit play rate one stats for basically every faction are pretty goddamn damning. Because there's some stuff you look at, and I mean, let's just look. Obviously, you got your Land Sports City Watch don't count, but Game Brigands only 106 games played. Ouch! It's more than I thought. To think that Kingsguard get played more than the Brigands do, and Kingsguard can only exist with one commander. Crossbowman. Oh god. Anyway, it's pretty damning. It shows you what was good and what was bad in play rates.
It's actually super interesting to look at play rates versus win rates. The thing that gets played the most is almost never ever the thing that actually performs the best, unless you're called conscripts. They're about the only thing that is played all the time and wins all the time.
Flayed men are pretty close to it as well, right? They're the most consistent, I think.
Flayed men, okay, like depends if you're talking about really like the highest use, highest use thing in a faction. Yeah, the unfortunate thing actually is when you go and look at it, the flayed men are one of the are within like the top 2 or 3 performing units inside of every single faction. Yeah. It's not a Lannister specific thing. Like you might think, but the synergies with Lannister. It's like, no. Just every faction. Flayed men are one of the highest performing things.
Looked at? Yeah. Synergistic for literally everyone. All right then. Yeah, so it's cool, interesting, and God, it would be amazing if we did this for the current balance patch and saw it unveil for the current balance. No. Not happening for a while. So, we will move on. Was there anything else I was going to talk about? Oh, yeah. Upcoming tournaments, right? Because we've got some big things, obviously. We'll jump straight to it now. The LGT. It's happening still, strangely enough. If you haven't heard enough about the LGT yet, and you're watching this, then you definitely live under a rock without internet.
I mean, we haven't actually talked about it in quite a few weeks because, the balance patch came in and stole the show 2 weeks ago. But
I mean,
today is the last day
to
buy a ticket and to be entered into the draw to win a faction starter. There is also a real possibility, we haven't decided on a date or the amount or what, but there is a real chance, particularly at the rate that the tickets have been selling. We sold 100 tickets and the event is capped at 128. And the organizer, maybe we should have actually listened to them earlier. The organizer actually put quite a bit of pressure would be the wrong word, but he really encouraged us to actually be charging more than the £40 ticket price. And there is a real chance that the tickets will go up at some point, either at the end of next month or during the next month. Go up to like the £50 that he really kind of recommended that we sell the tickets at. That is still significantly cheaper than the 40k event costs to play in and stuff like that.
It's like 70, 80 quid, isn't it, or something silly?
I'm not sure.
It's bloody expensive. That's all I remember. Looked at it.
But we decided to keep it at 40, same as last year, because we thought that because we still just wanted the event to grow. We wanted to hit 128 players. We wanted it to be the biggest that there's ever been. And I'm sure we would have got there anyway, even if we charged the higher price. And the higher price just means that we can do more on the day. We can give out more stuff. And we can give out better prizes. So yeah, like I really just, guys, buy a ticket because there aren't loads left. There is a limit at 128 that we imposed on ourselves because we think that we'd really rather there was a really good 7-round 128 tournament than we ended up at like 150 and kind of like had a very incomplete what would it be, a 256 bracket.
Yeah. 8 games. That
also, we don't think that we can fit in 8 games over the weekend. Not at the moment, particularly with the perceived longer games, all those kind of things. So guys, tickets, go and buy them. I'm not even just like, I'm not here trying to tell you we need you to go and buy these tickets because it'll make the event bigger and better. Like, I am flat out convinced we will be at 128. If you want to be there, don't dabble and delay, because you might not be able to get a ticket.
Yep. We have got a semi-announcement. It wasn't really an announcement. People who obviously follow this will probably already know. The man himself, using last year's art, because our art guy is currently unavailable. God damn it, Scott. Duncan Rhodes is coming back. He liked the event so much last year, and Daryl's been in contact with him again, and he's going to be returning to the London Grand Tournament as planned. Obviously subject to his real life not getting in the way, which, you know, like all these things, it might last minute end up with COVID or something like that. You never know. But no, he'll be down at the LGT, and he'll be judging the painting competition like he did last year, and probably playing. So, you know, we'll see. He played last year. He probably will play again.
Yeah. I mean, I assume that he's intending to play.
He enjoys the game, doesn't he? So
he is a player, and he has attended, like, you know, a number of different tournaments.
That
with
Jamie,
faithful Jamie Lannister.
Jamie might be good this patch, so or at least a bit better. So you never know. He might go out there and take some wins with Jamie. So yeah, do check it out. Obviously, we've got there's a nice just picture of Duncan's lovely face and some lovely miniatures as well. So yeah, do obviously buy your tickets. It'll be great. It'll be amazing. We've already sold 100 tickets now. So there are only 28.
The ELO is also really popular. The ELOs have had about 50 tickets sold.
Yeah. Which is mental.
So, I mean, if you can, guys, come for all 3 days. Like, the ELO is going to be a great event. It will be presumably the biggest in-person ELO event that's ever run. And it's only a side event, guys. But it'll be a really, really, really good tournament.
It's just the ELO event is just bants. No one can just come along, enjoy yourself. It's great. Have a couple of beers.
And not to, you know, say, God, I created such an amazing tournament structure, but the ELO is actually a really, really good tournament structure for when it's massively oversubscribed for the number of rounds, because that is when the point at which whoever won with the worst possible thing wins the tournament. It's not who went out there and absolutely dominated their opponents the most. It's who took the worst thing in the game and still managed to win. So the ELO will have had plenty of time to settle by that point. I really think that we will have a good idea of what our worst factions are, neutrals. And we'll see whether or not people are willing to still field those worst factions and can still pull off 3 wins. And, you know, and we'll decide and spread out all those 3 wins based on how tough those matchups were, not by whether or not you really, really dicked on your opponent, but whether or not you could eke out a win under tough conditions. And I think that's a really useful part of ELO, as well as all the other bonuses of changing the lists that people run, changing the commanders that are most viable, all that kind of stuff.
Do you know what I actually am looking forward to the most with ELO? Is I think ELO tournaments are going to be better because the balance is better across the board. I do think that you're going to find that there are more viable, like the gulf between commanders is probably going to drop, which we'll have a little look at in a minute to see if there's been significant changes in that front. But it'll be super interesting if the gulf is a lot lower, because if it is a lot lower, then actually more stuff becomes viable. And actually running the lowest commander on, like, in the event, you know, running one of the worst commanders in your faction is not going to be that far away from running the best. So if someone wants to bring the best commander in the game to try and get all wins, that becomes viable again. You know, in a way, I'm going to try and win, but you know what? I went 2-1 with something that wasn't so good, and that was actually just enough to eke out your 3-0. And yeah, it makes the whole ELO event a lot nicer because actually it's condensed rather than, you know, what people saw before where Offal was basically a null and void pick. And on the flip side, if you picked Andrew Estamont, it was like, oh, your chance of winning the event has just risen quite dramatically because he's just that bad. You know, So I think the whole pack being closer will be massively beneficial to ELO events as well. So I look forward to that. It's going to be good. I look forward to the LGT. LGT is just going to be good, isn't it?
Yeah, it's a long way off yet.
It is.
I
It is.
I have no doubts that it will run. I have no doubts that it will be there. I will be there, but I'm not. I'm not fully mentally there yet. You know, a long way.
You've only just done the update for the website. You're still 2 weeks behind.
Yeah.
Which reminds me, Carlo, when are Bear Cavalry and Drowned Men going to be added to the stat site?
When their ID number becomes available through War Council.
Yes. We've had that question a billion times, thereabouts. Maybe a factor of 10 out, maybe it was only 100 million times this last week. When it's out on War Council, we put it on stats. It's as simple as that. If people don't like that, then talk to War Council and T1, not us. The fact that the actual worrying thing at this point, we talk about the 2022 update. We still haven't seen the War Council get updated with Bear Cavalry when they have hit general release in the US. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, guys, like, honestly, talk to them. Like, I don't know. Like, there is never necessarily a positive way to do it because the assumption is always that it's a complaint. But I do think that there should be an expectation that when something is a general release, that it's on War Council. I would like it to be.
You know what? Even if we had a date, if they said mid February or mid March now, it'll be. That's when we can get it sorted because of the red tape. We know it's not them who run it. It's run by an external company. But yeah.
And so I say, like, you know, like, they don't really have particularly official channels. Like the Facebook group is about as official as it gets, it seems. And I don't think that people should complain and say, you know, kind of like what, where, you know, why this is bullshit kind of like stuff. But I don't think there's anything wrong with, you know, asking continuously every day. Can we know when this is, you know, can we please have this? This has been released. Can we please have it? Can we please have it? Until you gain some kind of response, you know, like.
Well, I mean, it's scary that the 22 updates still aren't on War Council as well, which, you know, that's an entire separate kettle of fish. But yeah. All right then. So, what else are we going to talk about? Oh, I know what we're going to talk about. It's a Monday. It's Tourney Ground, and we've got some pictures. Hey. So, this
That's
one
fast.
here. Have you seen this picture?
I've not seen this picture. I've seen the work in progress.
Yeah. You know who this is from then, right?
Yeah, I know where this is from.
Yeah, so this is Duggars, the real Duggars, on Discord. Duggars in chat here today. He's a very good painter, and he likes painting up at the moment Greyjoys. Don't ask me why. He's just on a Greyjoy painting binge. He's a Lannister player who paints Greyjoys.
I mean, he's a Greyjoy simp like everybody else.
He's painted up these guys with the base. What do you think?
I think the bronze is really nice, actually. I do like that a lot. Yeah, I think his blue is good. Possibly controversial point. I don't like bases that thematic, but that's just me. I don't like bases where people add tons of height. That's the thing I actually don't like. I don't like dogs or dragons and stuff where people have put them on like a pile of rocks that high. And I don't like the back rank. The fact that I understand that it's a ship's bow, it has stairs, all these things. You can create a more dynamic kind of pose. You can see the miniatures better, all that kind of stuff. But it breaks my immersion when I look at the table and then there's just a miniature sitting like 2 inches off the table. It's really, really good work. A very solid 0. It's not for me. It's not actually for me. I don't like thematic bases of any kind.
It's true. He just likes a little bit of
Controversial.
dirt on the base, and then some static grass, and he's like, "Oh, great base."
Yeah, I want my base to look as identical to the tabletop as possible.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's actually something that came up this week randomly. Talk about terrain. We friends of ours on Friday night were playing Legion, right? And they had all this 3D terrain and everything, and it looked really good. But it feels like it suits Legion with the way that it plays and the style of the game and this kind of thing. Whereas for Songwriters and Fire, I feel like 3D terrain actually detracts from the game in a weird
Yeah,
way.
I've never been pro 3D terrain
No.
in Song, but I am pro it in other games.
Yeah.
I can never quite explain what it is about the way Song plays that I'm really happy with the 2D terrain, and some people really find it off-putting. Some people really think that it detracts from their games. But personally, I just want a really nice 4x4 mouse mat board, and 2D terrain, and then bases that match as closely as possible to the table. It really annoys me when I go to tournaments and then I end up on like white snowy board or something like that, and all my mud bases like just contrast with it really badly. But you can't prepare for every situation, unfortunately. Yeah, I've never had a problem with 2D terrain myself.
Yeah, it's definitely a weird thing because we're lucky enough the club we play at has a lot of 3D terrain, and we could use 3D terrain, but we actively choose not to because it doesn't add anything to the game in our opinion. And certainly for me, the big thing is like I like seeing what's on the other side of the battlefield because the game kind of plays like that. Whereas I can kind of understand in the likes of 40k and in Legion and all the kind of skirmishy type games, the idea of being behind cover and like sneaking around and doing that kind of stuff. We used to play Necromunda, right, with absolutely fucking tons of terrain. It thematically made sense. It was great, but for Song, it just doesn't feel good. Yeah, I don't know. Anyway, we'll have a quick look at the power rankings here. We'll look at the commanders. Last thing before we look at tournaments as a whole. Offal has probably barely been played, and as a result, his ranking has barely changed. Should we see if he's actually gone down a bit though? I don't know why I have it.
I'm pretty sure he has.
He has dropped fairly consistently for a while, but yeah, I mean since the February the 13th, 14th, he has dropped off. He was at 60 and now he's wallowing at 54. So it's only a drop of 5, but I mean, probably hasn't got that many games under his belt. No. He's probably got maybe 10 to 15 games in that space of time. Probably not very many. So yeah, he's dropping. That's a good thing, surely. Because he should drop, probably. He is weaker. So yeah, Mother of Dragons is barely changing at all, although she is dropping. Actually, no, she's dropping quite significantly, right? She was quite high before. I always think that she was really low. Oh, she's probably just not being played. Yeah, I think. Wow, look at that. That's insane, actually. Let's just take a minute there. Mother of Dragons has been played since the patch 3 times.
Interesting, because they presented the idea that she no longer reduces the cost of dragons as not a straight nerf, right? Like,
yeah,
obviously it is a straight nerf. There are new list builds to be explored and discovered with Mother of Dragons. I think that Mother of Dragons would still be played reasonably. She would be less good. She would be less dominant. She would be losing ranking, but she would still be getting played if she had lost the Mother of Dragons card, but dragons hadn't also been nerfed. But she was hit on both counts. Add in the fact that she kept the 2 victory points that she gives up, which is now an even more significant thing now that scoring is slower and that commanders can't just camp objectives. She's lost on all 3 fronts. There are very few reasons to want to use her now.
Yeah. No, I agree. I don't think we're going to see much movement in Mother of Dragons at all in terms of the ranking, and purely because she's not going to get played, which is kind of sad. Because like Ramza says in chat, I think she's probably garbage tier. Certainly.
No, she's casual tier, which
Yeah.
I think the Dragons always should have been, but
yeah. We'll see. We'll see how that all comes out. Mance still absolutely dominates third position, and we've talked about this. It's worth noting that Mance himself has been going up in rating, but Free Folk have also been rising in rating, with Offal no longer dominating the game. The Free Folk win rate has gone up, and as a result, Free Folk win rate going up means Mance goes up, because Mance is the best Free Folk commander. It's as simple as that. I will say though, having played a couple of other commanders now, if you're a Free Folk player, do try the other commanders. I think they've got value. It's just such a shame that Mance is obviously the best. I don't know how you found it the other day, Carlo. What do you think of Steer? You played against that?
Yeah, I think that Steer has some dangerous cards.
You mean that quest card with all those vulnerable tokens I put on you?
Yeah, I mean Final Strike.
Yeah, Final Strike.
Yeah. I mean Final Strike and change to Final Strike.
Yeah.
Is quite significant. And he definitely caused me problems. Like, you know, he's a commander to always think about.
Not
and yeah, well, I think that he's worthwhile. That like it's not just a Mance double pairing as a go-to.
Yeah, I would tend to agree there. Can we just spend a minute, guys? And does the rest of the rankings really matter at all? In number 9, the man himself, Loris, has finally broken into the top 10 for Baratheon.
Loris has always been by significant margin the highest performing Barra commander.
Yep.
I mean, I was about to say that Renly side got no buffs. I mean, they got Thornwatch to be almost playable. I still think they're not even a particularly solid unit at 6 points.
Yeah.
I've seen some people talking about putting Loris in Thornwatch and using them as like a mobile assassination unit that attacks and then retreats and survives and stuff. But I still think like you're clutching at straws. Like,
yeah.
Overall, Loris just brings overgrowth, which is an amazing card.
Yeah.
But Loris did get buffed. The base deck got buffed.
Yep.
Champions of Stag got buffed. The Master Warden got buffed. There are lots of things in and around Loris which he previously didn't use at all. Like, Loris wasn't really fielding Champions of the Stag. He wasn't really fielding Master Wardens. There are now options that he can field. I've seen some people looking at fielding Rose Knights with a Master Warden in. Basically, now you're like, well, if you won't attack me, then I'm going to just keep engaging you and doing 5 wounds a turn. Sorry, 5 hits every time I activate. Which is not crazy, but I think you really just move yourself into the range of like, well, I'm just definitely going to retreat from this unit at every possible opportunity because I never want to let you start in combat. But I do think that Loris has always been the Baratheon top dog, and we'll see how high Baratheons can go.
Yeah, Baratheons have been making a slow rise, which has been good. Should we look at the bottom end, see what's been lurking at the bottom end of the commanders?
Any significant movement?
Yeah, exactly. I don't know if basically it's Andrew, right? Has Andrew managed to pull himself off the bottom away from Tywin? Yeah, he has. He has.
Hey,
Andrew's pulled himself a bottom over Tywin. Tywin is still shite, and actually, rightly so. Joffrey is now at -58 as well. Joffrey has been that slow decline. and he never quite seemed to get there. I feel like he's heading towards that bottom point now. Gregor's still there. Davos. Yeah. Oh dear. Roderick and Rob's still down there as well. So Stark's not. They're pulling them up, but not pulling them up quickly because Roderick was quite poorly rated at one point as well.
I mean, guys, the stats move slowly. Like, especially there hasn't been that many changes, right? Like,
No.
they are subtle changes. They are not monumental shifts in the game balance. We're seeing things creep up. We're seeing things slightly change its positioning, slightly change its ranking. But I mean, if you want and expect them to change faster, then submit more results, because the system is designed to react very slowly to results, unless there is a monumental shift in its win rate, right? Like, when there is a monumental shift in something's win rate, it will shoot up the rankings. But we've not seen that. What we've seen subtle changes, and that's going to subtly move things in certain directions. And it could take a while before we see that, unless we see really significant amounts of people submitting results. We've just started to see tournaments kicking off with the new rules in place.
Yep.
And they're just going to start to creep in, and we'll start to get a new idea over the next couple of months.
Yeah. Unit ELO, though, obviously everyone knows that they were reset. They appear to be adjusting faster, but that's because they were reset. So just remember that. And the unit ELO is pretty goddamn damning at the moment. With one random thing. It's all Starks. Starks have had a high play rate since the change. I mean, they've always traditionally had quite a high play rate anyway, except in 2021. But the Master Warden creeps in. The Master Warden, 1 point attachment for Baratheons, creeps in, which is kind of nuts. Prefect Raiders.
Yeah, he's maybe better than I gave him credit for. I do think that, having played against it, Hold the Line is more significant an impact than I thought it was going to be. I still don't know whether or not I want to buy it for 1 point, but I definitely give it a lot more credit when it's on the opposite side of the table now.
Yeah, especially if there are methods of you getting into combat without having to spend activations with Hold the Line available in your unit. That's huge. I think, stuff that's, for an example, if you can give something like BBG's Hold the Line, now, okay, that's an 8-point unit, and it is relatively easily killed, but being able to come in on the charge, then activate off the back of that charge, and immediately do more hits, that's very strong. You put something like, anything else in there, overrun opportunities, things like that. There's some possibilities. It says you told me. Yeah, you did tell us. I think the difference is that we don't see it, mainly because I just think low activation barrows should never start in combat if you're running Hold the Line. Personally. That might just be me.
Also, people tell us we're wrong every single week, Ilya. This is the first time that we've ever had to admit that maybe somebody else was right.
Yeah. Prefect Raiders, I mean, they were always going to be at the top there, but the rest is just dominated by Starks. Wardens, believe it or not, making the cut as well, probably because of that cheaper level there. And the first Night's Watch entry we see is Sworn Brothers at 18. God, that's refreshing, isn't it? The first Night's Watch unit not being the first 20 entries we see. Should I tell you what is also interesting as well, which is probably ultimately down to the builds people are testing. People are trying in-faction builds now more. We haven't seen any neutral entries.
Yeah. No neutral.
Got Stormcrow Mercenaries coming in at 22.
Stormcrow Mercs, 22.
Do you remember when they were a plague on the game, Carlo?
When were they a plague on the game?
1.6, Bran and Hodor.
1.6, Bran, Hodor, Stormcrow Mercenaries. Yeah, but I mean, people mostly use Darksworn Swords or Berserkers. But yes, they were annoying when people would buy Rickon, Bran and Hodor, loads of dogs.
We are starting to see those lists reoccur a little bit. 3 dogs, 3 infantry units, and Tully Cavaliers, and 2 NCUs. That's a 9 activation list you can actually get to with Rob Commander. We'll see how that ends up being, because if that ends up being a good list, that is very reminiscent of 1.6.
Mhm.
I hope it doesn't end up being good. I don't want 1.6 back again.
I don't know. Like, I feel like a lot of people halfway through the last edition, said like, "I want 1.6 back."
Oh yeah, over 2021. Yeah. I just don't like the idea of being charged with nothing I can do about it and getting killed by Tully Cavaliers, and then going, oh, but it's fine. I don't even activate him. He's got 3 dogs. Gone are the days of taking Walder NCU just so you can kill dogs. I remember that. Yeah, should we look at the bottom? They're moving down into the realms of obscurity here at 30 and things like this. Ironborn Bowman, Ironborn Reavers, and Eric for Greyjoys. Just
Look, guys, I'm just gonna say it again. Stats don't care what you think. Stats don't care what you believe about this unit. Right now, it is losing games.
we could talk about why that might be. It is worth noting that the negative here is only negative 20, whereas I think the Stark stuff that was quite strong was seeing like positive 30s. So
yeah,
it's comparatively lower play rate / lower loss rate, if you will. But yeah, it's damning. I thought Bowman and Reavers were good. I still think that they're good, personally. I would go away and try and disprove these stats. But I do wonder if Greyjoys are just losing to the likes of Melisandre Axel builds or things like that. So, yeah.
maybe, but the thing that you're talking about them losing to, Lightbringers are also down there at the bottom.
There as well.
So, Greyjoys are currently losing, guys. No, or at least the things that we think make up a good Greyjoy list
just aren't
currently
performing.
not exactly winning.
No. I wonder if that will change as the things get more settled, or whether or not Greyjoys are just struggling at the moment.
They do.
So yeah. You know what I am surprised about? Maybe it's because less people are playing them. I don't know. Tyrion, half-hand commander. So Tyrion is the lowest rated Lannister piece. Lannisters aren't abysmally as bad in terms of like what's losing compared to the Ironborn type stuff, which is surprising. I think the play rate's a lot lower, so that'll have a much bigger impact. But yeah, nice to know the buff to Savage Giants didn't mean a fucking thing. Still the lowest rated free folk unit. Yeah. Anyway, it's certainly interesting. Obviously, we've got a long way to go before we see. Oh, look at that! Can we just have a moment of silence, please? The Tychonosaurus wallowing at 294. That is a 293 place drop.
Poor Tycho.
And how? Sorry, just remind me. How many points did they change him by?
That would be a 20% increase in his price.
25% if you increase his old stat, right?
I guess.
Yeah, I mean, he had a 1 point change, and it's a massive change in his apparent power level. We said it before, 1 point is a lot of points. So, we will go to events. And we'll talk about events as the last thing today, because we haven't done this in a while. And, Carlo, do you know how many events are happening this weekend? Do you know?
I guess, are we at like 4?
4? Let's try doubling that.
8 events.
There are 8 events this weekend happening. So, I'll go through a couple of events. Technically, one's already started, but we didn't give it a shout out last week. We have A Dream of Spring, which is a Russian TTS event that technically starts on the 1st of March, which is tomorrow. But they have, for some reason, they put the February the 27th in there. 17 players in a event for Russian TTS players, I assume.
Awesome.
Yeah, brilliant. They've had a decent crowd there for a while, so it's good to see them continuing to play.
Is it who always wins?
Lordic.
Lordic. There we go. Are we expecting Lordic? Yeah.
He's in there. He's in the event. Oleg.
He is in. Here we go. See if Lordic can remain king of Russia.
It is. I mean, there are quite a few other names in there, like so Friendly Fract Octopus, Eve 76, Spirit, Jimbo, 5 Goril, like names that Yak, names I've definitely recommended before, seen before. So yeah, great stuff. And I hope that event goes really well for them. It seems like they've got that TTS community nailed down, and it might only be like 20 of them that play, I think. But if they're playing regularly, who cares? You know. We've then got a load of events this weekend. So that's tomorrow. We've got 8 different events happening over this weekend coming up. Literally, TTS events obviously happen over time. We have got so many events happening in this next weekend. We have got Invaders Store reopening, which, by the way, brilliant. It's brilliant that obviously a store reopening up in Indonesia. That's looking to run an 8-person event in store. They're looking to run it ELO. Hey, kickstarting, awesome. Re-kickstarting all the local communities up there. Fantastic. We've got Talvisotta. I probably butchered that. An event in Helsinki. I'm going to throw it out there that if I check out who's in here. Yep. Timu running an event there. Currently at 10 players. So that's another Finnish event obviously happening there. Great. Obviously, we spoke to Timu the other week. I am under no impressions that they'll be having a good event there. And it's going for 2 days. Solid. Have a good weekend playing games. We have got some pronunciation that I'm not even going to try in Poland, another Polish event. Where would we be without the Polish scene doing an event? We have currently got 8 people signed up. There are more on the waiting list. It's all the usual names, the likes of Bloodraven, Masara, Peter, all there. So it's another event happening this weekend on Saturday. We have got another event in Poland, which is a league starting up. They're looking to provide. And they've opened it up to 100 players. Powell, who's in chat earlier today, is looking to run this. Suster. I'm guessing he's wanting a lot of people to sign up to this event, and I don't know if it'll be starting now and then ending in November, or what he's got planned for who's going to sign up, what's going on there. We'll see. He's opened himself for a massive event there, potentially, if he can try and get the players in. It'd be interesting if we saw, the Clash of Regions we saw the Spaniards do last year.
Yeah.
I'd love to see something like that happen in Poland, because I don't know if they've got as an extreme level of player base. They definitely have got clusters which could do an event similar style, which I'd love to see. And this might be the start of that, bringing together the Polish community, which would be great. We've got a Dance with Daventry. Now, this one gets a special shout out. This is being run by the Tane, one of our patrons. He has got 11 people signed up, but that's a lie. He's actually sold 15 tickets. The couple of the others haven't signed up on the site yet. He's got 1 ticket left for the event running in Daventry. 1 ticket. So if you're interested and you're in the Daventry or local area, sign yourself up, get yourself going along. There's names on there that we've seen before, the likes of Tim Whitney, the great painter. Carly is going along. I think it'll be Carly's first event on Stats, who does all the Frontline gaming articles. We've got Brian McGonigal. Do you think he's going to take his free folk and run some mammoths?
Maybe.
We can hope.
I mean, I can see his lists, but
I know you can because you're an admin. Scadders, and we've got Psycho as well. So that'll be great to see that event. And obviously, I really hope it goes well. It's the first event that they're running in Daventry, that Tane's running, and I think he's hoping it really kicks off well. And I hope it really kickstarts the community there, because I know that he loves the game, and there are a lot of people. It's quite central, Daventry. Central UK. I mean, it's still south, but it's relatively central, so it's a good place for people from London and the East Coast to get across and play games as well.
Absolutely, yeah. You really hope that when somebody runs an event like that, people will travel for it. The guys from Liverpool are going, Scadman, other names that we've seen before. People are traveling for it, but you hope that it can also engage the local community, get the local players enjoying the game, and really grow that shop scene as well. So hopefully it manages to achieve both of those.
Yeah, no, I really do hope. So if you are local to the area, or you are not so local but fancy the travel for the weekend, do get tickets on Saturday. One ticket left. So hopefully that gets snapped up this week. Next up, we've got the Wolves of Winter. This was a rescheduled tournament after they had some issues with scheduling and things like this. This is run by Mythicos over in New Jersey. They're running it at the New Jersey store. Mythicos, old friends of Stats, who were with us back in the days of the Guild, which is over a year ago now, Carlo. Over a year ago when that all packed up.
Yeah. Which means that it started a year before that, right?
Roughly, I think it was like 9 months, 10 months before that, yeah, give or take. So yeah, obviously that's fantastic to see, and I'm guessing I haven't got any players sign up just yet. I'm guessing they'll do sign up on the day because I think that's what they did last time. Like they will turn up in the morning, sign up, and put the lists in when they get there. But yeah, no, I really hope that event goes really well. So yeah, can we just take a minute? I saw this artwork when I was loading all these up earlier. This artwork, it's amazing. I don't know where they got it from.
Yeah, I mean, tell you what, there is a lot of brilliant A Song of Ice and Fire artwork out there from like all the board games that have existed, all the card games. You can find like tons of art from RPGs. Yeah, I mean, if you go looking, there's a lot of really good stuff.
Yeah. So anyway, this is another event in Russia. This is a physical event, 3-round event in Russia. I'm not gonna try and work out where, guys. It's on the site. It's there. I'll zoom out a little bit on the map so you can see. Now, yeah, I know that. It's near Yekaterinburg. So it's currently got 10 players. It's similar kind of people we saw before, Evgeny, but it looks like a much more local event. And it's interesting to see names that we don't see on the TTS there as well. So that's good. Getting more players involved and obviously furthering the scene there in Russia. I really hope that one goes well. We've got Chelmsford Bunker, a class of members march, which is their they're kind of doing this now at Chelmsford. I know that Dan among some of the other guys have been trying to get this going, as well as James Stanford. They want to try and get like a semi-regular tournament going in the Chelmsford area, so they could go along and have these game days. And you'll notice most of them are from the Chelmsford area. And I think it's a fantastic idea. I do think it's a really good idea. Have regular club nights or whatever, and then have like a what we'll do a weekend, and we'll do that with semi-regularity, even if it's once every couple of months. What a great way to get people together and put all these list tests and all the rivalries from things like the club nights to the test. Yeah. I think it's really good. It's a shame that our community is A, quite small, Carlo, and B, we're all busy on weekends. So doing weekend games like this are hard. But it's a good thing to see. And I think that is it. That's all 8 covered. There we go. All of the 8 events that are running just this weekend in one fell swoop.
There's also been a bit further out, like we're starting to see announcements for US national qualifiers. I know Sunday Slaughter will be running one. I believe Fabricators Forge. They've also got a date for one. I know that Mythicos are putting together a date for one. So I hope to. I hope there's lots more of them. I hope there's loads. I'll tell you what, that's almost a piece of news, right? I don't know how widely it is known, but it has been officially, as far as I can tell, been announced that there is going to be a last chance qualifier on the Thursday before US Nationals. So I can stop complaining about how I'm not allowed to enter US Nationals. I'll just have to go and win 12 games in a row or something to be able to win nationals. But you know what? If there's a route, that's all I want, and I'm really pleased about that. So hope to see as many as you can at Gen Con.
There is. I'll quickly get this one up. I just found this one, which I really like the idea of. Sorry, this is a UK event happening in March, not February. It's happening on March. Bring your own box starter tournament. So is it a £5 entry? And you're aimed at new experience. Ah, so you just
It's a
take
single
along
starter box.
30 point games, and you just take a starter box. Love it.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah. I think that's a brilliant idea. I looked at the idea as like an escalation league for quite a while. Never quite managed to make it happen in the end. But yeah, like personally, I thought a week by week escalation where every so often you add one more box to your collection is a really great way to bring new players in. And I think that the starter box is a really, really good way to run a starter tournament that then just doesn't exclude people who don't have huge collections and who are just trying to get into the game. And, that graph that we showed shows how incredibly important it is to get yourself a neutral heroes box. And these are just things like that feel like barriers to entry to competitive play for some players. So then just to say, all you need is that really, really good value, really nice single box starter set that they sell.
Mm-hmm.
The value inside of a starter set is absolutely undeniable, which is, very common these days with all games. Marvel Crisis Protocol, Star Wars Legion, all these games, when you look at the starter set, like so commonly the advice is like buy multiples of it because it's such good value.
Mm-hmm.
But the starter set is such a complete army, but they're very, very rarely fielded as such in competitive play. And I think that's a really, really interesting idea and very interesting discussion about what faction would even be the best.
I know which one's the best. Starter box only. Rathians, isn't it? Because that time that Fabio beat Michael with.
I might. Oh no! I mean, ooh. I guess I go. I guess I'd go John Night's Watch.
Yeah, I would
Double
go.
Swarm Brothers. You got Watch Captains. Yeah, it's got to be
Ranger
John Night's Watch.
Trackers, Ghost.
Yeah.
Yeah,
John
John's Night's Watch is pretty good. Free Folks, garbage. I mean, you can get Mance, not that garbage.
Targs is decent with a Drogo list.
Drogo
You
Vets.
play an all cavalry Drogo list.
Is it double screamers, Outriders?
Double screamers, Outriders, Veterans.
Yeah. Okay, that's actually, and you get Illyrio right still, who's the solid pick. And probably like Danny NCU. Actually, yeah, that's basically a full Targ list. 30 points, you have to scale it back a little bit.
Lannisters are garbage.
Lannisters are double guardsmen, halberdiers, Clegane brigands if you're running the new one. Starks might be okay. Double swans, berserkers.
You got Rob.
Yeah, got a Great John.
Yeah, Stark, Rob and Great John.
Yeah.
Greyjoys. They're missing their 7-point unit, and you got to field Reavers at 6.
You're on double Reavers.
Sorry, Reapers. Reapers is what I meant. Hollow Reapers.
I know.
You do have Victorian.
I know Victorian and Asher. You have to run Asher
and
Commander,
you can
though, probably.
Victorian as a Relentless. You know what? I'd be really interested to see the tournament play out.
Yeah.
I'd actually think that's really interesting if you actually just gave that to really high-level competitive players and see how it played out.
I think Night's Watch would probably win it, but I'm not sure. Anyway, we also have, as I said, you mentioned the Gamers Haven there, so I thought I'd bring this up. Gamers Haven Sunday Qualifier as well. It is happening on May the 21st. It won't be the only national qualifier that they're running, obviously. I say that will be running. There will be other events running as well, but obviously this is the one that we talk about because it's on stats. And if it's on stats, we'll talk about it. That's how it works. So yeah, it's 24 players, and they're looking for over 17, where the top 4 will then qualify.
Yeah, I was just about to say, yeah. So as long as they hit above 16, they'll get 4 qualifiers, right?
Yeah.
Good luck to them.
Well, very quickly, because we're not even at 2 hours yet. It's mental. We'll very quickly just go through some events that did run. We had a Polish event happening, just a 6-player event called the Milek Conspiracy, that was won by Starks. Great stuff.
Great John. Let's have a quick look at the lists.
Great John, Eddard. I'll share these on some of these on Facebook later on the week. It's a Great John, Bastard Girls,
Great John,
Berserkers, Mormont Veteran, Mormont Veteran.
Mormont Spam. Cool.
And Eddard with She-Bears, Tully Cavaliers, and Starts on Swords and Mormonts in everything.
Mormont with the healing Glory Seeker. The what does Eddard's one do that heals as well? So the same ability.
Rally Cry.
Yeah.
I've got a question for you, Carlo. Have we? Because I am curious. Have we finally found a meta of attachments? Because
I'll tell you later.
You run attachments in a lot of your units. I'm running them a lot in mine. Starks seem to be running a lot of them, although I don't necessarily think they should. Maybe, I don't know. Is the 1-point attachment or the 3-point attachment? I mean, 2-point attachment, we're still meh. But is the 1-point to 3-point attachment choice actually now quite appealing? Maybe.
People seem to think that they are.
Yeah. Interesting. Starks won that event. We had another event in Poland, 9 players. This was run by Loris and Stanis. Wardens, champs. God, I hate champions, Stag. Wardens, Lightbringers, Queen's Men.
Interesting.
Oof, Queen's Men, Ramsey Theon. Jesus. Ugh.
What's Ramsey give again?
The
intimidating presence?
An intimidating presence. The heal and intim.
Okay, so he can bring you back to life as you start to die.
Mm-hmm.
Interesting. I don't know if... Nah, I wouldn't pay 9 points for that unit myself.
I'd just stay away from it. It's movement 4. Fucking killing the rest of your army first. What else we got? Fabricators Forge. Oh, this was won by Ian. It was a 50-point event at Fabricators Forge. He ran Jaw and John. In a 50-point event, though, so very different. Obviously, changing the spectrum a little bit, but a real mix of units with veterans, hunters, swarm brothers, conscripts, cold hands. The NCU lineup's very similar. But yeah, good to see a different collection there come out from Ian. In a 50-point event. We had the first event run by Chile. Simon Hernandez won this. He was just in chat earlier. And he ran it with Starks, running Great John and Eddard. There's a combo we've seen before, Carlo. I wonder where we've seen that before, Carlo. Did we see it just before, Carlo? Did we see it in Lockerbie's team event a lot, Carlo?
Let's have a look at the list. I'm gonna guess less veteran spam, but maybe they still did.
Mormont She-Bears with Great John.
Yeah.
Berserkers with a Mormont Vet. Berserkers with a Mormont Vet. Naked Berserkers. Right. Stark Outriders. Only 2 NCUs.
A lot of Mormont veterans.
And in the Eddard, no attachments.
Kind of suggests why Mormont veterans are currently the #1 rated thing on the site in terms of unit rankings, because people have been spamming them hard and winning events.
Yep. Probably. So yeah, it's good to see. I like this Eddard list though. I mean, it just proves that whole conversation about attachments.
2 or 3 NCUs?
2. Dancer and Caitlin.
It was interesting. We've seen a lot of low activation counts. I think outside of, the 50 was different. Obviously, there was a lot of Swarm Brothers, a lot of Watch Captains and that. But there was a lot of 7 activations going on there. So yeah, I'd be interested to see how things shake out. I do think there's really, I think it's really time for just an open TTS event. Like, I think it's time for people to throw down and find out, have people come out with whatever they can really pull together as the nastiest thing, and see where things go.
We had a 20-player event in Germany. This was near the Belgian border, I believe. Not far from the Belgian border. This is almost unpronounceable, but someone did check it out. the other week. It's basically as close to meaning like bar fight or let them fight or something like that. Anyway, Rossi, player obviously that we've heard of, and Ilya came in with 3 wins, but Rossi won it on secondaries with his Baratheons. Axel and Courtney, so mixing it up a little bit. The Axel Queen's Men, Davos in Lightbringer is interesting. Doubles Dragons and Noble Wardens, Melisandre Reese Walder. Interesting to see Walder see some play in some of these lists. Still think Walder's shit, but he's seeing play, so I mean, sure. And a Courtney list there.
Well, I mean, you say that. He's not picked very often, but one of the most surprising things I found when I started looking at those results is Walder is one of the highest win rates in every faction.
I know. But I challenge you on that a little bit. And I will challenge you later.
So this is the classic, I don't like the stats, so I'm going to tell you why they're wrong.
No.
But like, you just have to accept that he is winning the game.
He's winning the game. Do you think that is a lot to do with the fact people are trying to NCUs a lot more? And the 2v3 NCU games are happening more regularly. Think of the number of 2 NCU lists we've seen in the meta, a lot more. Where
I'm talking about the entirety of 2021.
Oh, 2021. Fair enough. I didn't realize that's what you were talking about. No, that does surprise me. Yeah,
I think he's shit, but you can't deny the fact that he is winning.
I wonder where he was winning. I'm going to have to look that up now. Do some investigation.
No, again, this is the thing. This is Mickey being one of those shit users of the site.
No.
That comes in, I disagree with it. Now I have to find a reason why it's not true.
No, I have to find out why he was winning.
Into, why it's happening or what this is. Yes, it does generate a question. You should discuss whether or not he is powerful. But what you're looking for is you're looking for a reason why you can discount those results.
No, I'm looking for a reason why he's winning.
They're different because your opponent wasn't using many NCUs or something like that. But that's not the way everybody should look at these results. They should just be like, here's this thing.
Mm-hmm.
I should reevaluate my opinion on that thing. I should think about it, maybe try it, don't try it, do whatever, give it more respect, give it less respect. As soon as you go digging for the reasons why and start singling out results as but I discount this result because this or this or this or this. We lose the value of what it is to look at things in that pure objective way, which is he is performing better than I thought he was.
Yeah. And I'd like to know why that is. That's all I was saying. I'd love to know why he's performing better than we think. Because like you say, I think he's shit. But he's clearly not.
This is the thing. The why isn't look at the results. The why is he is performing better because he is better than you give him credit for.
Okay. Sure.
The why is never allowed to be the specifics of the game.
No, but it has to be. I mean, it has to some extent where he's being used. Surely, to some extent, if he's being used in Night's Watch, for example, I would go right. Why is he good in Night's Watch? If he's being used in Baratheons and he was winning with Baratheons, I say, why is he winning Baratheons? Those are the questions I would ask.
Okay.
Yeah, that's just curious. I'm just curious as to why he's better than he is.
That he's the highest win rate in nearly all factions. He's one of the lowest uses, but one of the highest win rates in many, many factions.
That is interesting. It's just making me want to look at why that might be, and then run him more clearly. All right then. All right. So that is the end of that. There's one last thing we need to do before we sign off for this week, and it is for our good friend Lockerbury. Let's see if this is the right one. He said we'd do it on here. Double check. Awesome. So Lockerbury has put together a spreadsheet to do the round pairings and everything for the second week of the TTS event. I know, right? He said the pairings are up. Hey, so Currently in first place is Counting Crows with 3 wins. Don't Panic in at second place by VPs, I believe. Or maybe he hasn't got this right. But anyway, round 2.
They don't look like they're in order.
No, they're not in order. We'll fix it afterwards. But round 2, this is the important bit. We can see that round 2, Feast for Crows, is the game mode, and we have We Do Not Win versus I Guess I'm Captain, Counting Crows versus the Flatlanders, the League of Nations versus the First Triumvirate, Somewhat Decent versus Heroes World, Don't Panic versus Western Warriors, and a free win for the World Wardens of the West, who get the bye this week.
I forgot there was a bye, and I honestly was like, who called themselves a free win?
Yeah, it's a bye. So there we go. Those are the things for today. Let's zoom in a little bit. Let's go for... There we go. Mainly because Lockerbree's actually writing live on there for you guys to see if you're watching this. He's written, I'm live on TG, hi community, and the next thing he's going to write is, Mum, grab the camera. So, round 2 is the listings are up on this spreadsheet here. They'll be posted, obviously, in the Discord group for those who are playing in the team event. Any final words, Carlo?
No. Interesting to see how things pan out in the event. There's already been some wins that, like surprising based on names alone. So really interested to see where it ends up. This was also the person who I was talking to about the neutral usage. Also, this is a very interesting discussion around the team usage rules. And I'll be interested to see how these factions perform, where some of them are limited to not being able to duplicate certain NCUs. Like your first 4 points can't be on Peter Baelish because somebody else might want Peter Baelish. So we might see more pure factions. Like, we already looked at the lists, but we see the factions in their truest light in a lot of ways, undiluted. So I think this is a very interesting tournament, although of course it's a relatively small number of results in the grand scheme of things over a few weeks. But there's a lot of important players in it, bringing their A game. So I think this one's an interesting one to watch. Good luck to everybody who's entering one of those 8 tournaments kicking off this weekend, going on this weekend, and just thanks for using the site. Keep getting your results in so that we can get some interesting things to talk about as early as possible.
Mm-hmm. Definitely. Cool. In which case, guys, we'll leave it there for this week. At leisurely just over 2 hours. So thanks a lot for tuning in yet again. We'll be back next week where we'll be talking about, I'm sure, hopefully some news. Maybe War Council have updated. If not, we'll find something to talk about, I'm sure. Maybe have a small episode. Who knows? And I hope everyone's games this week go really well. I hope everyone wins or enjoys himself, at least. That's the important thing. And we'll catch you this time next week. Have a good weekend, guys.
Ready, aim, release! Anyone see my mammoth?